You're sitting in a crowded room. Laughter echoes around you. You have hundreds of contacts in your phone, 500 LinkedIn connections, thousands of followers, yet your chest feels like it's being crushed by a 50-pound lead vest. Your heart rate is spiking to 100 beats per minute, as if you're being hunted by a predator. But you are completely safe. You smile, you nod, you pretend everything is fine. But deep inside your limbic system, a silent alarm is screaming. In the next few minutes, we will tear down the illusion that you are broken or socially inept. First, we will expose why forcing yourself to be more social is actually triggering an evolutionary glitch, a glitch that is slowly destroying your neural architecture. Then, we will uncover the toxic, invisible structure of modern connectivity that is deliberately draining your emotional bandwidth. And finally, we will reveal the ultimate biological truth about your isolation. Before we dive into the microscopic warfare happening inside your brain, let's look at why your body actively chooses to shut down. Look at your phone right now. You probably have an unread message sitting there, a friend checking in, a family group chat, a simple invitation for coffee. You see the notification, you read the text, you know exactly what you should say, but your thumb just hovers over the screen. You freeze, you lock the phone, you put it face down, and then the heavy guilt washes over you. You call yourself a bad friend. You label yourself as an antisocial introvert who is simply broken. You sit there feeling profoundly isolated entirely by your own doing. But here's the brutal, liberating truth that neuroscience wants you to understand. That paralysis is not a moral failing. It is not cowardice, and it is certainly not a sign that you are destined to be alone. What you just experienced is a highly sophisticated biological defense mechanism. Let's strip away the emotional guilt and look at this purely as a mechanical failure. Your brain is essentially an organic supercomputer. And just like any machine, it has a finite amount of working memory, or RAM. According to cognitive scientists, an average adult makes roughly 35,000 micro-decisions every single day. How to respond to a passive-aggressive email. How to force a polite smile when your colleague complains. How to navigate the exhausting maze of modern office politics. Every single one of those microscopic actions requires your prefrontal cortex to burn through glucose and expend precious cognitive bandwidth. By the time you sit alone on your couch at 7 in the evening, your emotional RAM is operating at 99% capacity. Your neural pathways are literally running hot. So when that innocent text message arrives, your brain does not see an opportunity for connection. Your amygdala, the ancient threat detection center of your mind, registers that simple message as a final, fatal demand on a system that is about to crash. It sees it as a threat. And what does a desperate system do when it faces a catastrophic overload? It pulls the plug. It triggers an emotional circuit breaker. That feeling of emptiness, that sudden apathy where you simply cannot force yourself to care, that is your biology forcibly shutting down background applications to keep your core survival systems running. Your isolation in that exact second is not a personality flaw, it is a cooling protocol. Your nervous system is desperately plunging you into a state of sensory deprivation, because if you had to process one more social interaction, your psychological architecture would completely collapse. You are not pushing people away because you want to be lonely. You're pushing them away because you're trying to survive the invisible hemorrhage of your own energy. But society does not tell you this. Society demands that you just go out more. Society tells you that if you feel lonely, the ultimate cure is to shove yourself back into the very crowd that drained you in the first place. And this is where the modern tragedy truly begins. Because the more you try to fix your loneliness by forcing artificial connections, the more toxic your internal environment becomes. We are actively poisoning our own biology with the absolute illusion of modern connectivity. And to understand why this forced socialization is slowly destroying your true identity, we have to look back at the original software installed deeply within your DNA. Imagine walking through a dense, freezing forest exactly 100,000 years ago. The wind is howling, the night is terrifying. In that harsh reality, your survival depended entirely on one single factor: the tribe. If you were deemed useless, if you were rejected by your small group, it was not just a sad feeling, it was a literal death sentence. You would freeze, you would starve because of this brutal environment. Human evolution installed a highly sensitive, hyper-vigilant alarm system deeply embedded inside your brain. A social radar designed to constantly, obsessively scan for any microscopic sign of rejection. Fast forward to today, the physical threats are gone, but that ancient software is still completely running the show. We call this a massive evolutionary mismatch. According to evolutionary anthropologists, your brain was perfectly designed to process the emotional cues and maintain the relationships of roughly 150 people over your entire lifetime. But look at your life today. You wake up and immediately subject your fragile nervous system to the opinions, the highlight reels, and the silent judgments of thousands of strangers through a glowing glass screen. Every single time you open a social media app, your brain furiously attempts to process that infinite digital noise as if you're standing in front of a massive global tribe. And when your post is ignored, when a message is left on read, or when you're forced to engage in painfully meaningless small talk at a corporate networking event, your amygdala cannot tell the difference between modern social friction and ancient tribal exile. It processes that momentary awkwardness as a lethal threat. It spikes your cortisol. It floods your bloodstream with panic hormones. You might sit there thinking you're just feeling a little lonely. Or maybe you believe you're morally flawed for hating social interactions. Let's completely falsify that moral guilt right now. You are not a bad person. Your biology genuinely physically believes you're about to be cast out into the wilderness to die. This is the brutal, invisible reality of our hyper-connected era. The technology and the societal structures you navigate every single day were not built to nurture your soul. They were mathematically designed by engineers to ruthlessly hijack this exact evolutionary vulnerability. They have weaponized your ancient primal fear of being left behind. They created an artificial predatory architecture that constantly drains your severely limited social battery, leaving you completely hollowed out, numb, and exhausted by noon. So you must absolutely understand this right now. You're not antisocial. You're not fundamentally broken for desperately wanting to hide in your car instead of attending a party. You are simply a victim of a catastrophic design flaw of the modern world. You're being forced to provide infinite emotional bandwidth from a biological machine that was strictly built for a deeply finite, intimate reality. Your profound loneliness is not a lack of people surrounding you. It is your nervous system screaming that it is starving for the warmth of a real, authentic campfire, while society relentlessly forces it to swallow the cold, artificial light of 1,000 empty screens. But the technology is only half the crime scene. The true psychological destruction happens when you try to fix this isolation by becoming exactly what everyone else wants you to be. Society politely calls it people-pleasing or being adaptable, but under a clinical neurological lens, it is a form of slow, deliberate self-mutilation. You sit at the dinner table after a brutal 10-hour shift. You listen to your partner complain about their day. You nod. You validate their feelings. You absorb their heavy toxic stress. Your amygdala is desperately begging for absolute silence, but you violently force your prefrontal cortex to maintain warm eye contact and project a comforting empathy. You are completely exhausting your last remaining drops of emotional bandwidth just to keep someone else comfortable. Every single time you suppress your own profound exhaustion. Every single time you swallow your legitimate frustration to keep the domestic peace. Every single time you say yes to a favor when your biological system is violently screaming no, you're not just being a good, reliable person. You are actively severing the neural pathways that connect to your own authentic identity. Over the decades, you meticulously build a flawless social mask. You become the perfect parent, the ultimate reliable employee, the accommodating friend who is always available to help. But here is the devastating cognitive slap that the self-help industry absolutely refuses to tell you. Your brain always knows you're faking it. When you interact through a carefully constructed mask, your nervous system fundamentally cannot achieve neural synchronization, the literal biological mirroring of brain waves that only occurs during genuine human connection. You simply cannot bond with another living organism if your brain is constantly burning glucose to play a theatrical role. This is the exact reason why you feel so suffocated at social gatherings. You end up surrounded by a crowded room, yet you feel desperately, dangerously lonely because the people around you do not actually love you. They love a phantom. They love a highly curated, heavily edited projection that you artificially created to avoid being rejected by the modern tribe. You have successfully engineered your own perfect, invisible prison. And the physiological cost of maintaining this fake persona is absolutely catastrophic. Your body meticulously keeps the score. The chronic jaw clenching during your morning commute, the shallow, rapid breathing in the middle of a mundane meeting, the inexplicable, crushing fatigue that no amount of weekend sleep can ever cure. That is not just daily stress. That is the literal physical weight of carrying a dead version of yourself. You're bleeding out your psychological resources to water a garden where you're not even allowed to bloom. You wonder why you feel so profoundly empty sitting inside that dark car, staring blankly at the steering wheel while the engine ticks? It is because deep down your subconscious realizes a terrifying, inescapable truth. You're not just isolated from the modern tribe. Through years of relentless adaptation and masking, you have completely, systematically isolated yourself from yourself. Stop right there. Take a deep, deliberate breath. I want you to completely pause that relentless cycle of self-blame. Let us gently put away the brain scans, the cortisol charts, and the evolutionary survival theories for just a moment. We need to step out of the cold laboratory and step into the quiet, sacred space of your own conscience. Because the truth about what your body is doing right now is actually deeply beautiful. When you finally close your bedroom door, when the notifications are silenced, and when you're left sitting in the overwhelming quiet of your own space, that heavy silence you feel is not a punishment. It is an absolute sanctuary. For years, you have been taught to fear this stillness. You have been conditioned to view isolation as a tragic failure, a sign that you are not lovable or worthy of connection. But what if your nervous system is actually performing a miracle? Think about a bone that has been fractured by repeated microscopic stress. To heal, it requires a cast. It requires absolute, unmoving stillness. Your sudden urge to isolate, your sudden inability to text back, your desperate need to cancel plans at the last minute. That is your psychological immune system wrapping a protective cast around a fractured identity. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is initiating a profound existential neurocleansing. In this silence, your mind is finally allowed to drop the exhausting theatrical performance, the heavy curated mask of the perfect parent, the relentless employee, the always available friend can finally slip off. And what remains underneath is the raw, authentic version of you, the shadow part of yourself that you have been starving in order to feed the crowd. When you sit in the dark and feel that aching loneliness, you are actually feeling the painful yet necessary friction of your shattered pieces slowly knitting themselves back together. You are experiencing the raw sensation of returning to yourself. The modern world has convinced you that your worth is measured by your constant availability, by your rapid responses, and by your endless emotional output. But biological reality tells a completely different story. True human connection, the kind that actually regulates your heart rate and soothes your amygdala, cannot grow from a place of chronic exhaustion. You cannot give water from an empty well. So the next time you feel the overwhelming urge to retreat into your shell, I want you to radically change how you perceive it. Do not fight it. Do not force yourself to smile through the crushing fatigue. View that isolation as a highly advanced biological privilege. It is your body demanding the necessary space to breathe. You are entirely permitted to let people down today. You're allowed to leave texts on read. You are allowed to be temporarily useless to the world. Because in the grand infinite timeline of human evolution, your most important responsibility is not to keep the artificial modern tribe entertained. Your ultimate responsibility is to ensure that the delicate, complex neural architecture of your own soul does not collapse under the weight of their expectations. Now, stand on the edge of this realization. You have looked into the dark mirror of your own loneliness and seen that it was not a reflection of your failure, but a shadow of your evolution. You're not meant to be a permanent cog in a noisy, grinding social machine. You're meant to be a conscious observer of your own existence. This path, this theology without borders we have walked, ends not with an answer, but with a return to the only source of truth that matters, the silence within. Do not go back to mindlessly scrolling or desperate reaching. Do not apologize for the space you need. The world will keep spinning in its frantic, algorithm-driven pace, but you have finally found the off switch. You possess the agency to stop the bleeding of your energy. You hold the sovereignty to define who is worth your presence and who is merely consuming your life force. Remember, the greatest rebellion you can ever lead is not a protest against others, but a quiet, fierce reclamation of your own nervous system. You are a miracle of biology, a conscious speck of dust, witnessing the universe through the lens of a human heart. That is enough. That is everything. You have been searching for a connection out there, while all along the only connection that was missing was the one between your mind and your own weary, beautiful body. Now, breathe. Let the noise of the expectations of others fade into the background. You are finally truly alone with yourself, and for the first time, that is exactly where you need to be. If this shift in your awareness has triggered something deep, something that feels like the beginning of an awakening, then take this moment to anchor it. Do not just watch and forget. Carry this stillness with you into your next silent hour. But know this, the shadows you have just faced have a name, and they are masters of manipulation, waiting for the moment you feel most secure to shatter your boundaries all over again. If you think you're safe now, you have not yet seen the true face of the predator that thrives on your empathy. In our next session, we will dissect the exact terrifying behavioral patterns that narcissists use to dismantle your sense of reality. We will decode their manipulation stages, not to make you live in fear, but to give you the ultimate recovery framework to never be their prey again. Are you ready to see how the predator truly operates? Or will you look away again?